In my day job, I'm the senior policy analyst with Texas Criminal Justice Coalition. I've been working with the coalition since 2014, February of 2014. I started at the coalition 7 months out of prison. They saw in me someone who had policy expertise, who also had made some mistakes, was not addressing my substance use and mental illness in healthy ways, and in fact ways that were quite destructive. And as a result of that, I committed offenses that resulted in a 6-year period of incarceration. When Texas Criminal Justice Coalition hired me, they saw that I was on firm footing, and they said, "You know how to pass a bill?" Because I'd worked in the legislature prior, and you know what the inside of a prison cell looks like. You're perfect. And I'm so grateful for that opportunity. One of the things that I've noticed in these 6 years is that there are absolutely incredible voices and experts all across the state, people who are formerly incarcerated or who have family members who have been incarcerated, who they themselves are showing up as leaders within their communities, people who are responsible for the outcomes of their actions, who are willing to look at how they can create change and are willing to build up leaders around them. And it's just astonishing to see that leadership. So in January of last year, we formed the Statewide Leadership Council, and it's comprised of leaders from across the state. We have members from Texarkana to the Rio Grande Valley. We have members from the Panhandle to Beaumont. And we are really eager to work with the legislature to describe a vision of transformative justice where people don't have to intersect with the justice system, but if they do, there's a route to rehabilitation, and that the offense itself is not a life sentence, that people have opportunities to create opportunities, financial, housing, occupational licensing for themselves, and not be permanently barred from opportunity in our state. And we believe in that, and we have people who are members who are gifted, who are leaders, and who have the internal power to actually make that happen. So that's who we are. That is the Statewide Leadership Council. If you're not already a member, I'm going to turn it over to Maggie Luna, and she can talk to you about how to become a member. But today we're going to talk to you about what we are advocating for during this legislative session. So I'm incredibly excited to introduce the amazing Maggie Luna, who's the coordinator of the Statewide Leadership Council and one of my favorite human beings. Maggie.
You're my favorite human being.
Oh, shucks.
Thank you so much. And yes, me and Doug started doing this a year ago. I can't believe it's already been a year. But so today we're going to talk about our goals for this 87th legislative session. We're going to be using the hashtag SLC100 whenever we talk about our goals and what we're doing. You'll be able to find it on Twitter, hashtag SLC100. And so what our plans are for this session is to present 3 pieces of legislation. One will be about parole, one will be about clearing records, and one will be about the possibility of clearing felony records. And we will go more in depth into that. But I just want to thank everybody for being here today. And we are real people who have really been impacted by these policies that we are bringing to the forefront today. So Doug's going to kick it off.
Wonderful. So I'm excited to hear about people's personal experiences. I think for those of us who have been to prison or who have family members incarcerated, we have long advocated for common sense parole policies. We So many of us who have been through the system have worked really hard to grab a hold of rehabilitation and have found that oftentimes our parole system, we're not certain whether that's taken into account. So we have a system right now where uh, people, when they have served the minimum period of their sentence, about 60% of them are denied, right? So the judge says you're eligible at this point, but 60% are denied. And they're denied for reasons that the person can't act upon. So reasons like nature of the crime um, or periods of or criminal history or something like that. People can't control that, and so it gives them no information. And moreover, when people are oftentimes denied multiple times, then when they are approved, then they're placed into some type of treatment program. So imagine getting a 20-year sentence, coming up for parole at 10 years, denied 4 times, and then they put you into a treatment program 14 years after the offense. And it's that type of policy that has driven up the average age of the individual incarcerated, right? So in 2005, we might have had an average age in the 30s. Today, it's in the 50s, right? And that's one of the reasons why the healthcare costs in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice are skyrocketing, absolutely skyrocketing, because we're turning our prisons into nursing homes. So we are advocating for a common sense parole that gives us access to relevant treatment and allows that to drive parole decisions. It's a safer alternative. It means that people are going to, when they are released, you're assured that that individual has done what they need to do to re-enter society. I'd love to turn it over to Jennifer to share her personal experience.
Thank you, Doug. And I just want to say that I'm so proud of what we're doing, because it was almost maybe 2 years ago when I first got out on parole, and I was on super intensive supervision, which that's a whole nother beast. And I remember being at Walmart, because it was the only place I could be that day, and talking to Doug for the first time. And really this vision of SLC was kind of beginning to formulate. And I look now and I'm like, I can't believe how far we've come. And how powerful we are as a group. So I just want to say thank you, Doug, and everybody who has been part of that vision. So parole being more effective. So, I had a non-aggravated 12-year sentence, which if anybody, most of the people watching this understand what that means, but it means that I don't have to do half of my sentence. I come up relatively soon. So I came up for parole about 1.5 years into my 12-year sentence. And I was denied. And, I hadn't had any disciplinary. I had participated in work and whatever programs were available at the unit. And I continued to be denied parole 8 more times for eight more years. And then I received that programming, like Doug said, at the end of the sentence. So with each parole denial, they gave me the reasons, right? You get this sheet of paper. And it has these massive groups of reasoning for that denial. And it was just as Doug said, it was static things that I had no control over. A prior conviction, incomplete supervision in the past, and interestingly, drug and alcohol, a substance use disorder, right? Well, Ms. Toon, you can't make parole because, this is one of the factors to why we denied you, is because you have a problem with substance abuse. However, you can't get into the program that you need to treat that until you make parole. So you were in this catch-22 all the time. And I don't really know how to describe the sense of hopelessness that begins to sit in every time you come up for parole, and that dream and that hope dies. and you have done everything that you have been told by the system to earn that privilege of parole and make it. And I remember after about maybe the fourth denial, my father was in visitation, and I'm so grateful to have family support. And he said, "You're lying to me. I don't know what you're in there doing that you don't want to come home, that you continue to get denied parole." And I said, "Daddy, I don't know how to explain this to you. Parole, it's this mystical enigma that nobody understands, that nobody has any, it's a roll of a dice. It feels very much like I'm just being swept away. And it's just whenever, however, and there's nothing I can do to contribute to my own rehabilitation, because they're not explaining to me what I need to do. And the things that I'm desperately doing to show them that I want to be a part of this process doesn't matter. It's so impersonal, and it's so, it's mind blowing. Like, because the way society and our legislators believe parole works is not how it works at all. And it can look like that on paper. And we always try to stress that when we go into legislators' offices, is that I know that TDCJ is going to say, well, look, here's our policies, these are our procedures, and the parole board is going to say that too. But it can look like that on paper, but that is not the experience, and that is not the way it works. And what we're advocating for is a system that allows us to be part of the process in our rehabilitation, and to be accountable, and to really participate in that, and not just feel like you are being swept away once again, and not having any type of contribution in that. And sometimes there may be a stigma or a misunderstanding that people in prison, they don't care about what they've done, or they don't care about their treatment. They're just waiting to get, that's all it's about, is just waiting to get out. And that is so far from the truth. That is the furthest thing from the truth. We were desperately ready to do the things that we needed to do, and we were just lost all the time in trying to understand what parole, what society wanted for us, because we were just stonewalled in that process. So this is dear to my heart. And who's going to be next talking about their experience? Is it Matthew?
Just briefly,
Sure.
how are you doing now?
Oh, how am I doing now? It was a struggle, because they gave me the treatment on the end of it, and then I was put on super intensive supervision, which made life extremely more difficult. But I persevered, and I got a great job working in advocacy in Austin, and I'm seeing those personal goals be accomplished with the right support. And interestingly, I always like to say this, is that the support that I needed along the way came from people just like you, and we have to really advocate for ourselves and each other. So
Wonderful. We are so lucky to have you as part of this community. Thank you, Jennifer.
You're welcome.
Matthew, we are so pleased. Why don't you share some of your experience?
Okay, I'm totally pleased too. I'm so grateful for the Texas Criminal Justice Coalition and them giving me the opportunity to share. I totally believe in our mission, and we're doing great things. So thank you. And thank you to everybody that's out there helping as well. I'm going to read a letter I wrote that alludes directly to what you were talking about, parole. And I'm also going to include some personal experience in there as well. Please forgive me, I'm nervous. All right. The average age of prison, I wrote this to legislation back in September. The average age of prisoners in TDCJ is over 50 years old. This creates an overbearing burden on healthcare costs due to the aging population being the most medically vulnerable. To help substantially bring down these healthcare costs, the state should consider looking at all the people that are serving outdated sentences from decades past. More than 50,000 people are denied parole every year at a cost of $1 billion. They are denied parole with no access to programming that would actually encourage their success upon release and give the parole board insight as to whether or not they are ready for release. The answer to these incredibly high healthcare costs is to prepare people for release through rehabilitative programming, before their first date of parole eligibility. This can be done through individualized treatment plans and access to programming that pertains to the nature of the crime before they are parole eligible. This will also help parole base their decisions on progress rather than things beyond their control. We ask you to make these changes to deter exorbitant healthcare costs and provide overdue reforms to the Texas criminal justice system. I now would like to add my personal experience with Texas Department of Criminal Justice. I was released from TCJC this past July. I served 23 months on a 4-year sentence. I was denied parole twice and then received my discretionary mandatory release. Still don't understand discretionary mandatory, but that's another story. When I was incarcerated, me and everyone else were under the assumption that good behavior and voluntary participation to the limited programs TCJ offers would not only help us move forward, but being granted parole. This is not the case. I received the exact same form letter in both my denials. They did not vary one bit. The reasons for denial were nature of the crime and history of drug and alcohol use. I couldn't understand why they would turn me down based on my drug use when the parole board has every opportunity to send me to treatment. Instead, I had to find resources on my own once I was released. I made the most of my time, but I did it with zero encouragement from the system. I implore you to give individuals treatment plans quickly and assign programs before parole eligibility. Base parole decisions on making progress towards said treatment plans. Use the parole system to help people that deserve parole. In return, you will save money on healthcare costs, and more importantly, you will help the people that want to change their lives. I want to talk about the treatment plan. When I went to prison, I came up for parole almost immediately at the diagnostic unit. And my family hired a parole attorney, and the attorney, we didn't ask for immediate release. We asked to be sent to the TCJ treatment program and then release me. They gave me a year set off. A year later, they gave me a serve-all to my short way, the discretionary mandatory deal. And that's when I got a treatment plan. So I was in there for, more than a year and a half before I even received a treatment plan. And when I got the treatment plan, I called my family and was like, I just got a treatment plan, and they give it to me after they deny me for parole. And I even asked them in there, why wouldn't they give that to me before and then, be working on said steps for me to be, granted parole. And so it made zero sense. And I also would like to reiterate, there's plenty of people in there trying to do the most with their time and are trying to make parole. And they're in there, signing up for anything and everything. And they're doing Bible studies, and we collect all these certificates and we take it to the parole liaison on the unit. And I'm not even sure where that stuff goes. And, it's just broken. And if they did use it and used it the way the Texas Justice Coalition is trying to get them to use the common sense parole, then, they're going to save a ton of money. I wanted to choose a different word there, but they're going to save a ton of money. So that's really all I have. I thank you very much for allowing me to speak. This means a lot to me. Sorry, my voice is cracking a little bit, but
Matthew, before you go, so because you took responsibility for your own rehabilitation, and because when you take that responsibility, what's your life like now?
Well, I have a sense of freedom and a sense of self-worth that can't be matched. But, I still, I'm trimming trees right now. Ultimately, I would like to get my master's in social work and help troubled adolescents. I plan to sit for the GRE and do that as soon as COVID lifts. But right now I'm trimming trees. We're going to come into that later with clean slate, new wings and all that. The barriers we face when we get out. I've been hired for jobs, and then once they do the background check, they've rescinded the offers. So there's all sorts of things that we're working on as a group. But ultimately, everything's groovy because I am free, I am helping others, and that's what we're all called to do, man.
This is the SLC, folks. Such powerful, amazing people. Thank you, Matthew. We
Thank you
support
for
you in getting that. We support you in getting that degree.
Thank you.
Cynthia, I'd like to turn it over to Cynthia to talk about our contribution to a campaign to create a clean slate for people who have been involved in the justice system.
Yes, thank you, Doug. So Clean Slate is an initiative to broaden the ability for people to get expungement. Expungement is to have your records sealed or a non-disclosure so that it can't be used against you if you were to go back to court for another charge, or if you, more importantly, if you were trying to get housing, if you're trying to get a job. We know that those are the very fundamentals of what it takes to have a successful reentry. The expungement now, as it sits in Texas, you can be disqualified if you're convicted of a felony within 5 years from the date of the arrest in which you wish to have expunged. The statute of limitation has not expired on a dismissed case in which the individual was charged with a felony, having received deferred adjudication, having received probation. The charge an individual wishes to have expunged was part of a criminal episode, and the individual either still has charges pending from the episode or has been convicted of crimes from said episode. So essentially, if you've been convicted of a felony, if you have taken deferred adjudication, if you have taken probation, or if you were charged with something and it hasn't been 5 years since the charge was dismissed in a courtroom, you are not eligible for an expunction. So that is a problem in itself. People that were charged with a crime and dismissed should not have to wait 5 years because the state made a mistake in charging them with the crime. And for people who have paid their debt to society, they have served their time. How are we supposed to ask them to re-enter into society and thrive if they have barriers to housing, if they have barriers to employment, if they cannot make livable wages because every job that they are qualified to do, their background prohibits them from getting? We are asking people to do something that they cannot do because we're not giving them the tools to succeed. They are simply trying to survive when everybody is eligible and deserves to thrive. There are a few personal stories from some of the panelists here today that can tell you what this barrier has done, what the experience of not being able to get their record expunged has done in their life. So I'll turn it over to Stephen.
Can y'all hear me? Great. Hello, everybody. My name is Stephen Waterton. I am in San Antonio, Texas. I'm a member of the State Leadership Council and a member of All of Us for None. My story really is the story of so many in your household. It's the story of your neighbor from left and right. It's the story of the person who lives behind you, and it's the same story of the person who lives in front of you. Because I come from the same community you come from. The community where if we reach out our arms far enough, we can touch someone who's also been touched by the system. I want to tell you about my son, Nick, who, like another child named Juan, or his cousin, Maria, and a friend of yours, Dora, who lives 2 blocks over. These children who wake up in our community with smiles in their face and hope for a better chance to live in our country, right? And they share amongst themselves what little they have, not knowing that they're providing for each other what we as adults in government have failed to do. Because a child doesn't realize that he's helping assist another child who is hungry because they're a parent like me, like your neighbor, like the person in front of you and behind you, like so many others in our communities and families who are struggling to just try to make ends meet, living on the brink, working to provide our families, or should I say, working with the lack of the ability to provide for our families. We couldn't have the basic living standards. We don't even have resources for our seniors, who are our parents, who are taking care of our children sometimes. So we need help. We're all in desperate need. That's the story that I felt and that so many others go through with their families when it comes to someone who has been in the system, in jail or in prison. And I think it's really important that we talk about that when we talk about my right to work. Because my right to work isn't just stopped because I might have a felony in Texas. My right to work is also stopped because I might just have too many misdemeanors and spent 5 years in jail in so many pieces that I haven't even realized I've been locked up for 5 years of my life. I'm suffering the same consequences as a person who has a felony record, not yet convicted, and someone who is convicted. That's the big thing I think that we need to understand as a common people about why we are in the positions we are, why the barriers between the rich and the rest of us are obstacles for those of us that are struggling. How do we improve and enhance our welfare, right? You know that newborn child that you know that smiles every day? Well, you might not be smiling by the time he's 13 if we don't do something about you not being able to provide for him or her. Having the right to provide for ourselves and our families is critical to a safe democracy and a better community. It is an investment in public safety, not just in the ability for people to provide for their families. It is something that is so basic, but yet so avoided as common sense approaches to what we need to do to help those in our communities. The state of Texas is deeply divided both racially and politically. We don't understand where we are because we've been blinded by so many different things and occupied by so many burdens. Well, greedy few have rigged the game. Corporations and CEOs continue to take advantage of us by locking us out. The Department of Labor has proven that people like me who struggled to even buy a $1 McDonald's are sometimes better workers and more loyal than someone who's never been in the system. Now, I am not saying, hey, go get locked up because it'll make you a better employee. What I'm saying is, having been incarcerated or in the system doesn't make you a bad employee. It makes us harder and more determined to get back on track. And maybe that's why we work harder than the average person who hasn't felt my struggle. My name is Stephen Waterton, and I am in the same pain as you, the same understanding that your families are struggling, that you can barely make ends meet, that before March of the COVID-19 outbreak, we were already under the dirt. It's pushed us further than 6 feet. Politically, we don't even exist in the minds of legislators unless we put ourselves out there. You and only you can do something about it. Our leadership does not exist without people. We're just a bunch of people hanging out. The truth is we are leaders of our communities. And as leaders of our communities, we are asking you, members of our communities all across the state of Texas, across all political spectrums, across all racial and ethno-racial barriers, and across all cultural divisions, to set aside our differences and think about the true recipient of smart justice economic policy. And that is that child who is voiceless, never seen in the halls of legislation, but it is their life they are going to make decisions about, believe it or not. Without you as parents who have been in this system, they have no voice. We plead with you. We humbly ask. And we pray that you join us this legislative session to bring tremendous radical social change to Texas. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Steve. Your story is powerful. Your testimony really reaches to the depths of our souls. I want to elaborate on some of the things that he said about the finances and the economic equality, that people that are system impacted, and that is in large percentage are Black and Brown communities, are not able to afford expungement. The cost of expungement is thousands of dollars. So even the people that are eligible, they cannot economically feasibly meet that qualification to get something that they are entitled to. And for those that aren't entitled to it, well, the process is even more rigorous and more lengthy, and it's impossible. And putting all the energy into trying to get an expungement when you don't have a safe or stable home or a job to make livable wages is irrational, and it's not logical for the legislators or for the communities to think that we should put that type of burden on people who are trying to transition into society to become productive members of the community. And with that, I will turn it over to Ariana. She is going to give a little bit of her personal experience and how expungement, or the lack of, has impacted her life.
Thank you, Cynthia. I appreciate the introduction, and I just appreciate to be able to give back and use my voice to speak on the benefits of expungement. So in the year of 2011, I was arrested for a felony arrest. During that year, I was given an option. The option was provided by my attorney was to go to a local rehab. Hiring an attorney was a difficult part. You see, I was left to fend for myself. I would not have been given the option if I was left in my own. My grandmother had breakfast weekly with a group of women, and these group of women all had life experiences. One of them being that they had had to hire an attorney for a family member as well. During that time, she told my grandmother about an attorney that my grandmother later hired for me. So then, after that point, she then said, sorry, guys, I'm super nervous. So during that time, after she said that she found the attorney, she went to the attorney and she said, how much do I need to put down? Whenever she went to the attorney, she spent $2,000 automatically off the rip. And that was only to begin the process. You see, I was sitting in county jail and waiting on her to say, this is the opportunity to get my loved one out of jail. So I went to rehab. While in rehab, I sat there and waited to be no-billed. During that time, it cost hundreds and thousands of dollars to do that. And then on top of that, I waited to go to no bill just to find out that I have to be expunged for my record. Even though I sat there, I went in front of a grand jury, I said, hey, this is not my crime. This isn't something I did. They believed me and they gave me a piece of paper that I could then give to employers to show that I was no billed. It then took $500 later to literally file a piece of paper to say, hey, you've been taken off your record. At that point, I was then eligible to be looked at by employers. I was eligible to be looked at by other people just to say like, hey, this person, to our knowledge, has no felony arrests. And that wasn't the case. You see, I was given this opportunity to be able to speak to my lived experience today and to say that I am 100% thankful for the privilege that I had from my family. If it wasn't for my family, I would have been left alone to my accord, not been able to hire an attorney, and then left in the system to just possibly be convicted on something that I was no billed for. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that story with us, Ariana. It really sheds light to the importance and the real need for this bill to be passed, and for advocates to really come forth and rally together and get this passed, so that no one has to go through an experience like that. And if they don't have the luxury of a support system or a family in place, which isn't always the case, that they're still able to navigate through the system with equity and equality. The Clean Slate Initiative would give everybody access to these expunctions. It would be equitable, it would be accessible, and we would then be allowing people to thrive instead of just survive. So next on the agenda is Maggie Luna, and she will introduce our next piece of legislation.
Thank you, Cynthia. And I just want to say I'm so proud to be a part of this with all of you here. I get more and more excited about this work every time we meet. So we've been talking about the Clean Slate Initiative, which is like a package of bills for automating expunction for people who are eligible, expanding the eligibility, and we're working with coalitions across the state to help get this legislation passed. But as our fearless leader, Doug, would say, people
So we have a little technical difficulty. Okay, so folks, can you all hear me? Great. Okay, so we have just a little bit of technical difficulty. So when Maggie is able to join us again, then that will be great. Just the story of our Zoom existence. So we're just going to press forward. Thank you all for sharing your experiences. So what Maggie is introducing is a bold possibility for our state, and that is to go beyond clean slate and to actually create a path to expunction for even those with convictions. People who have, like myself, who are folks on this call who may have done 10 years of a sentence and have been out of the justice system for a number of years, and that they have an opportunity to have a clean slate as well. And so I am going to turn this over to Roderick to speak about this possibility. I see Roderick is with us. Roderick, are you still with us?
Yes, I am.
Great. You want to share your story?
Yes, I would love to. Good morning, everyone. I first of all, I went to prison for 2 aggravated assaults with a deadly weapon and an aggravated robbery because of a drug addiction. It was a simple theft where I was stealing to get drugs. And I was sentenced to 10 years. I served 8 years on that 10-year sentence. I was paroled in 2010. This year will make 11 years that I have been out of prison. I've been off parole for 9 years. Coming home, I had a son I had to take care of. I had to go get because his mother was still out in the streets and on drugs. And so my first obstacle or barrier was trying to establish a safe environment for him to live in. And going to get an apartment in an area that was low on crime was, I would say, it was a hoax in my mind. I called apartment complex. I'll just tell you the story. I called apartment complex and asked them that they accept felons, and they told me they did. And so I went and I paid the application fee. I filled out the application, and they asked the question, how long it's been, since you committed a felon. Have it been over 10 years? And it had. But I was still denied an apartment because of my background, because I had sold drugs before and I used drugs, and so I was still denied it. So I lost the money for the application fee because it's non-refundable. And so on that end, I ended up, the long story short, I ended up finding out that if I had the finances, it would be easier for me to purchase a home than to live in an apartment complex. My second obstacle came trying to find employment that would pay me a livable wage that would allow me to be able to provide for my son and myself. The only things that were available for us were jobs at the city, working at the sanitation department that paid $9 and $10 an hour, or going to work for a temp agency with the hopes of being able to be hired permanently. But what was happening with that is the temp agency was sending us to employers that didn't accept felons. And so when the time came for me to get a permanent job, I was either moved to another company or I had to find another job because I couldn't get a permanent job because the temp agency was using me to make money with their employers. And so I ended up developing and starting my own nonprofit and helping men to come out of prison. But that obstacle is still there. Everywhere we go, we're not treated like citizens. I've paid my debt to society. I haven't had a encounter with a law enforcement officer whatsoever, only to help keep my community safe. But I have never been in trouble since then. And the only rights that I have today is the right to vote. And that's because I've been off of parole. Coming out, I didn't have that right. And so I don't feel like I'm a citizen. This new wings would definitely help out if we could get that passed, added to the Clean Slate bill, because it would help to restore my citizens' rights. And so I'm asking everyone that's on this webinar to please join in this struggle that we have, because it's not just me that's being impacted, but everyone that has been incarcerated is being impacted this way. We're not citizens, and we're not treated like citizens, but we want to be. We want to be taxpayers and not tax recipients. Thank you.
Thank you, Roderick, and thank you for, oh my goodness, I'm getting feedback now. Okay, thank you all so much, and I'm so sorry that we got booted off for a second, but we're back now. And like I was saying before, I wouldn't be eligible for Clean Slate because of my felony convictions. So, and these are things that are going to follow me everywhere I go. I put in 177 applications before I finally found a job that was a livable wage. And it's something that will follow me until forever if we can't get this passed. But I would next like to have Kirsten Ricketts talk about how it would help impact her life and how she would benefit with a piece of legislation like this.
Thank you, Maggie. My name is Kirsten Ricketts, and I am currently the founder and director of Restorative City Streets, which is a small nonprofit that helps women reintegrate into society post-incarceration. My story is similar to everybody else's. I was addicted to drugs and alcohol. Fortunately, I somehow had the ability to drink myself through nursing school. And from 1997 to 2005, I worked as an LVN in the Houston Medical Center. I worked med-surg, pre-op, post-op. I did some pediatric home health care. I was skilled in the work that I did. And when I left the profession, I was making almost $30 an hour. Now, in 2005, I sold some drugs to an undercover officer, and I lost my nursing license. The weird twist in this that nobody has mentioned is child support. And I owed child support on 2 children at $500 a month that didn't get paid during my addiction, which compounded interest during the time frame that I was drinking and drugging and circling in and out of state jail. So they added an extra $250 a month to the $500 to cover the interest on top of that. So I owed child support at the Attorney General's office $750 a month. At the end of all of this, by 2014, I was in arrears $103,000. So not only could I not get a job anymore in the profession that I had worked in to even make any sort of money to pay this back, but I had to find cash jobs so that they wouldn't take 50% of my little $7.25 check that I now had the capacity of earning. So I had this weird loophole that stuck me completely out due to the child support and the felony conviction. I couldn't apply for federal aid to go back to school because of the child support that was in arrears. Thank God that in 2014, my ex-husband signed away all the child support and forgave me. That was a blessing that allowed me to be able to return to school. So currently now I'm in school. Due to the work that the Texas Criminal Justice Coalition did in 2019 on the occupational licensing and regulation, I had the opportunity to reapply to have my nursing license reinstated. So I have just finished a refresher course, but due to the felony record, I will have 2 years of probation through the nursing board, although I've been clean and verifiably clean for the last 10 years. So I don't even know what the outcome or the procedures are going to be moving forward, trying to get a job in the nursing field again with the restrictions on my license that I'm going to have. So there are so many hurdles that I'm going to have to overcome in the process, and I'm going to have to go back to being on call to go urinate if the nursing board so chooses at their beck and call for the first year, and I cannot deliver any narcotics to any individuals. So after 2 years of this probationary license, then I should be able to go back into nursing without any restrictions on my license, but I don't know who's going to hire me, guys. So this is kind of going to be something to follow through this process to see how these interviews go. If even with the COVID, I'm thinking that maybe some opportunities, doors of availability will open. But if this new wings legislation were to pass, it would give somebody like me, man, a completely restored life. It would completely restore me to society, to my profession, to being able to be the provider for my family and my grandchildren that I so long to be. That's why I continue to go to school. I continue to go to school now. I'm going for my master's degree in human services with a concentration in criminal justice, and will probably take that on to a PhD in counseling and psychological research or studies. So, man, what that wouldn't do for me, Maggie, I tell you what it wouldn't do. So housing and employment are the number one things, like Cynthia said, that we face those barriers. And even though I run a center for women who are coming out of prison to reintegrate into society, I can't even rent an apartment. So without having to know someone or network through people, then I don't have the opportunity to go out there and live and function in society as a normal person. But New Wings would do that for me. That's all I got. Thanks, Maggie.
Thank you so much, Kirsten. And I want to thank everyone who has vulnerably shared a piece of themselves with us today. And I just want to mention that this is just a piece of the Statewide Leadership Council. We have many stories of many people across Texas who have been impacted directly by these policies. And we are all hoping to be able to get in touch with legislators and talk to you and give you some real life stories. So please contact me if you have any questions. My email address is mluna@texascjc.org. And I'm going to let Doug finish it off. And I just want to thank everybody for their time and for being here today. And I apologize, I got booted off for a second.
Thank you, Maggie. Thank you so much. We do have some time for questions. So I can see Zoom questions. So if folks want to enter those into the chat, that would be great. If there are Facebook Live questions, I will trust that our illustrious team at TCJC can pass those to us. But are there questions from folks who have spent some time with us today? Yes. In the meantime, while we're waiting for that, Maggie, you want to say, did you say how New Wings, how the name came about?
Oh, I didn't get to finish. So our fearless leader, Doug, says that we would no sooner grow wings than to be eligible for expunction. And so with this piece of legislation, it would give us an opportunity to grow new wings and become, have our civil rights restored. And as many of these people that I get to work with on a daily basis, that's all we want, is to become civil and have our civil rights restored. So, I mean, I just really appreciate being in this space. And I'm going to let Doug answer this question. Do you see it?
Absolutely. Some folks are asking about whether the bills have been filed. So this is part of a statewide effort. Clean Slate Texas envisions the possibility of having automatic record expunction for those who are eligible, for creating new pathways to expunction for obvious categories like people with who've completed deferred adjudication, and building towards new wings so that there's a real possibility that when you're done with your sentence and you're staying crime-free, that it doesn't have to haunt you for the rest of your life. It is a package, and we anticipate that the bills will be filed early in the week. And because this is a statewide effort right now, how we need your help is that we need you to get in contact, because here's what we could use. We could use you signing on in support, you being willing to contact your legislator. We, as the SLC, we have a goal through the 100 Days of Justice that we're going to have 100 faith leaders sign on. So if you want to bring this to your congregation to sign on and support, then we'd love that. We would love 100 business leaders. So if you have connections with your local chamber of commerce, we would love 100 educators, 100 recovery community organizations. We are shooting for, I should not use that term, we are aiming for 100 across the board. We want legislators know that that people around the state believe in this possibility, right? That it serves public safety, it serves our economy, right? And that it aligns with your values, because no one should have to carry their past mistakes with them for their entire lives, right? And you hear the incredible potential of everyone on this call, the ways in which we are serving our communities. You hear that, right? You have someone here who's Matthew, who is he's going to be a master's in social work, but he's trimming trees right now, right? We have Kirsten, who is serving her community, but can't rent an apartment. You know, think of these folks, right? And the possibilities that we are leaving on the table here, and join us. Let me see, are there other questions?
Doug, I think some people had some questions about the bills. Have they actually been filed? Do we have any bill numbers? Can you kind of explain where these priorities are right now?
Sure. The bills are in development, so we anticipate filing in February. And so because some of these are rather complicated bills, requiring automatic expunction, right? It needs to be developed. It needs to be developed well. And so that's what's happening right now. So right now, what we need is for you to join us and go sign on and support, right? So that when it is filed, right, legislators already know we can send the list of people who support. So that's what we need. And for those of you who are justice involved or have been in justice involved or have family members, come join the Statewide Leadership Council. Any other questions?
There was another question from one of the people in the audience saying that they would love to support, and they have 7 convictions for aggravated robbery, none newer than 1991. Would all of these convictions be expunged under this bill?
Well, it would depend on how long. So if you were convicted in 1991 and you completed, it depends on when you complete your sentence, because the way that New Wings is structured is that you've got to stay out of the justice system for a number of years. So it just depends on when your conviction, when you discharge your sentence, and how long it's been since you've remained outside of the justice system. Right. So I would say the likelihood is yes, if the conviction was 1991. We've got a member right now whose her conviction was from 20 years ago. It has been well more than a decade since she has, it's been more than a decade since she discharged her sentence, and she can't rent an apartment in Texarkana.
Mhm.
Right. So yes, I would say it would likely impact you.
Doug, just for the benefit of our audience, I have a question. This New Wings that we're doing, right? What particular part does that play in relation to probably seeking a pardon? Because getting a record expungement, right, having your record cleared, does that necessarily mean you're no longer a convicted felon? Because I don't want someone to say, I'm gonna get my record expunged or cleared and then go and buy a gun. So we want to be clear that this is just the beginning of an even greater process, because in the end, to get our full restorations, this State Leadership Council, I believe, will eventually push for massive pardons. But anyway, what do you think about that, Doug? Just so we can have a clarity on it.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. I don't want to get too, since pardon and expunction are two separate things. I want to join you in imagining the possibilities. What's really important is that you are part of us, that those members of the SLC imagine possibilities, right? And we're willing to put our leadership behind it to create those possibilities, right? The possibilities to have rights restored, right? Because we are your neighbors, right? And we are leaders in these communities here. We live right next door. Any other questions?
There was a question about hosting a lobby day, and we are following COVID protocols at this moment. So we may be hosting a virtual one within this 100 Days of Justice. So if you sign up with the Statewide Leadership Council, I'll be posting announcements. I also have, we have a Facebook page if you would like to become a member of the Statewide Leadership Council. And I'll be releasing our infographics for each piece of legislation. I will put that in the Facebook, and I'll drop it in the link here on chat. And if you need any extra information, contact me, mluna@texascjc.org. And we've got 1 minute left.
Just with this time, we have such talent here, and this is just 9 of us on this call, right? This is, our membership is robust. We're all showing up as leaders. And so I can't wait. If I've already gotten some texts from folks who are with legislative offices saying that they want to meet with us. I can't wait to introduce other members of the SLC. So please contact Maggie and let's have a conversation.
Okay, I'm dropping the link now.
Great. So we
Thank
are
you
at
so much.
1. Thank you all for spending your lunch hour with us. Thanks for hearing our stories and joining us. All right.
Have a
Thank
good
you.
session, everyone.
Take care. Be safe. Stay healthy.